Hey everybody, my name's Heather Thomas. This is my case study report video and analysis for my engineering ethics class. I'm going to be talking about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge incidents. There are actually a couple that I'd like to notify you about, and I'd like to give you a brief history of the bridge. So the way that I like to do things, I like to start in the now and then work backwards. So that's what I'm going to do. The Tacoma Narrows 2007 bridge is an eastbound bridge that resides in Washington State. There is another bridge beside it that's the westbound bridge. That's the 1950s Tacoma Narrows Bridge. The cool thing about the 2007 Tacoma Narrows Bridge is that it was placed beside an existing suspension bridge. The public wanted this so that they could have eastbound and westbound traffic on two different bridges. The 2007 Tacoma Narrows Bridge is just referred to as the 2007 Narrows Bridge, and then the 1950s bridge, which was the pre-existing bridge, the westbound side, it's actually nicknamed the current Narrows Bridge, which can be kind of confusing because it wasn't the most recent part of the bridge built. October 14, 1950 was when the pre-existing bridge was built. The construction took about 29 months and 3 workers lost their lives. Robert E. Drake was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He took a step, looked up, a cable broke, and a boom crashed onto him and it killed him. Glenn Whitney Davis and his friend were working on the deck, and they were loading timbers so a cement truck could drive across, and what happened was his friend swung too many timbers onto him and he just happened to take a misstep and he fell all the way down. Lawrence Stewart Gale, it was actually his first day on this part of the job, connecting to the roadbed, and he happened to observe that some welds in the section he was standing on didn't look so good, so he called up to the foreman and told him, hey, like these welds don't look good, and the foreman said, well, we haven't had any problems with it. And as they proceeded to work, the welds broke and Mr. Gale and a lot of iron, it was quoted 40 tons of iron, fell with him. Now there are lots of ethical issues already happening at this point, but I want to get to that part later. These two bridges, the westbound and the eastbound bridge, weren't always there. Originally, they had a predecessor, and that was opened July 1st, 1940. This was the original Tacoma Narrows Bridge. It only lasted 4 months before it collapsed because of a windstorm. Now, because this event happened, the two bridges that I mentioned previously were designed differently. And it's a sad thing, but it ultimately made the suspension bridges safer. So the bridge collapsing didn't claim any human lives, but it did claim a dog's life. His name was Tubby, and he was a 3-legged male Cocker Spaniel who was said to have been paralyzed and in the back seat of Mr. Leonard Coatsworth's car. Now, Mr. Leonard Coatsworth had to leave his car on the bridge because of the violent motion that was happening within the windstorm and the bridge. The bridge actually got the nickname Galloping Gertie because of how violent it was. There were actually 2 people who tried to retrieve the dog. Howard Clifford, who failed, and then Professor Farquharson, who also failed but actually made it to the car. He made it to the car, opened the door, and then Tubby was scared and bit him, and actually he was bleeding and his hand was hurt, and he had to come back because it was getting to the point where it wasn't safe at all for anyone to be out there, and he was worried about himself. And he actually made it back seconds before the bridge collapsed. So there were actually several parties that were involved in this incident. One of them was the Public Works Administration. They kind of hid some stuff underneath the rug. They claimed that they didn't know that there was any problems with the design of the bridge or anything like that. And a couple months later, it came out that one of their engineers went to the newspaper and said that wasn't the case. So what this person told the newspaper was that the PWA's field engineer, David Glenn, actually found lots of faulty parts in the design and refused to accept it. However, the PWA still accepted it, and so did the Washington State Toll Bridge Authority. The PWA fired Mr. David Glenn later and reported that he had actually been relieved of his position, even though it wasn't really his fault, like he refused to accept it and the PWA accepted the bridge anyways. And because of all of this, an investigation happened with the FWA. So the FWA Investigation Board came up with 3 reasons why the bridge collapsed. The first one being its flexibility, the second one being that the plate girder and deck acted like an airfoil, and the third one being that aerodynamics at the time was not something that was studied a lot. So there wasn't a lot of information on it, and the engineers made an accident. And they decided, instead of blaming one person, to blame the entire engineering profession. So now that I've given you a little bit of background, I want to talk about the ethical issues within all of the incidents. So obviously there's workplace health and safety issues. 3 people died during the construction of the current Tacoma Narrows Bridge, and during the construction of the 1940s Tacoma Narrows Bridge, engineering contracts were actually being fought over, so this could have caused some designs to be rushed, which might ultimately be why it failed. So the concrete evidence here, people have died. A dog died. It could have been a lot worse. There was waste in product, material, time, money spent to hire these people and build these bridges. There's the issue of why a safety net wasn't used. Mr. Whitney Davis, his death could have been prevented if there was a safety net. Now, with Mr. Stuart Gale, it said iron fell with him. There's a possibility the safety net could have still saved him, but there was a lot of iron that fell too, so it might have just ripped a hole through the net. But there's still that possibility, like he might have lived. So I really like the deontology part of this class, so I kind of want to relate this whole incident back to that. And just stating from Professor Burris's lecture, some sways he had up said, relating back to deontology is the ethical theory that duty is the basis of morality, key claims are moral principles, are universal, persons cannot be used as means only, and intention, goodwill, is a means by which to measure moral goodness. And to quote him directly, he was talking about Kant, and he said, just like there's stuff that we know, not knowing exactly how we know it, but nevertheless it's true, in ethics for him, morality works the same way. So one of the examples he used was a triangle. Like if you think of a triangle, it has 3 sides. Like you don't have to count the sides, but the triangle's just in your head and you picture it. So I like that little quote because it's like we just know it using our reason. I feel like a lot of people threw reason out the window when building this bridge, or while standing on the bridge. For example, Mr. Davis, he was standing there and he just said, yeah, these welds don't look good, and the foreman kind of kicked it under the rug. Where was his reasoning? Yeah, it's worked before. It might just be me, but if somebody's concerned that something they're standing on doesn't look safe, I might want to go check it out or have it observed before I continue to let them stand on it. The Public Works Administration threw reasoning out the window when they swept everything underneath the rug. They didn't want to be responsible for the bridge collapsing, even though they knew they had an engineer that said, yeah, all this stuff is faulty. And even though the engineer said it was faulty, they still accepted it anyways. They completely ignored the engineer, and people could have died. And sadly, a dog passed away, but it could have been much, much worse. So for part 2 of this with the hypothetical considerations, if I were a part of this team while the bridge was being constructed, some of the main things I would think of is, okay, I don't want this bridge to break. I don't want to lose stuff in the water below. I don't want people to get hurt or die while they're driving across this bridge. Not only because it's death, but also there's a lot of time and money and resources that go into this, and it's just a waste of material, and you'll have to build the bridge again. So for the second part of this, the hypothetical considerations, what are the fundamental engineering problems involved herein? What are the ethical problems involved with your team to consider here? Are there any unknown elements which are necessary to be ascertained prior to engagement with the issue at hand? And what are the potential consequences and impacts, concerns of my team's analysis? If I were on the team and everything had just happened, if I was trying to reevaluate everything, I'd say, okay, why did nobody take into consideration that Washington State is very windy? The Washington State Health Department has stated many times, like every fall and winter, there are bad windstorms, and they've actually put out information on how to stay safe during it. You know, if Washington State suffered from windstorms frequently, I'd want to know this information so that aerostatic flutter won't happen. And if you don't know what aerostatic flutter is, Joseph Kratz at Johns Hopkins University defined it as an unstable, self-excited structural oscillation at a definite frequency where energy is extracted from the airstream by the motion of the structure. Basically, what I'm trying to get to is if they knew there was a lot of wind, why would they build the suspension bridge like they would normally build a suspension bridge? That's scary. I know there's not a lot of information about aerodynamics at the time, and if I was part of the team, I just have some serious questions. If I were a part of the Public Works Administration and I knew that we accepted something and swept it underneath the rug, I would have tried to take it to the public faster. Like, I don't care about losing my job. I don't care about all that. You're putting other people in danger. I wouldn't want the Public Works Administration to put anybody else in danger with any other future projects with what they can sweep underneath the rug. Because the consequences of all of this, death, a lot of people could have died, material, structures being wasted, you're gonna need more money now to build another bridge better. I would have, if I could do everything over again, I would have wanted to put the time and resource and money into something and spent the time researching how it could be better for our area and our environment, instead of just sweeping something under the rug because contracts are being fought over and you have to get it done fast. But that's just my take on it. That's about it. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it interesting. There are a lot of really bad ethical things that happen, like why things are swept underneath the rug, why weren't there safety nets, why didn't they take into consideration that a suspension bridge over a really, really windy part of Washington that frequents windstorms every fall and winter, why didn't they change the design of the bridge beforehand? Why didn't they spend money to do the research for that bridge? It's just a lot of interesting things. And if I were a part of the team, I'd want to address the problems and probably try to take it to the public quicker. That way there can't be more damage done. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it interesting.